Got that coveted right after lunch slot. Number one, this is going to be very, very hard for me to stand in one place for an hour. That is far from my style. So, and apparently the table tips over. Yeah. Note to self, Mario, the table tips over. My name is Matt Edmondson. I was a federal agent with Homeland Security for almost 22 years. I've been a SANS instructor for about 7 years now, and I'm now a SANS author as well. And so I have a lot of experience with OSINT, with cyber threat intelligence. A total cheat code, though, is my wife. My wife used to run cyber threat intelligence for a Fortune 100, and now she's the head of that and a lot of other services for an equally large company as well, too. So it gives me a very kind of well-rounded perspective on different people's needs, right, both public and private sector, which is nice. And I'm going to start off, right, we're going to talk about breach data here. I gave a talk about breach data about 4 years ago because there hadn't been a talk about breach data. And I was using it constantly, and no one really wanted to talk about it. It was just kind of like in hushed terms. Even people that did, like, didn't think they should talk about it, like it was breaking the law or something else. And so I think it's important, though, to say that I wish there were no breaches, right? I'm not happy that the information is out there, but it is. And our adversaries are using it every single day. And so I think we're kind of suckers if we don't, frankly. And when I say our adversaries are using it every single day, it's not my opinion. This is one of my all-time favorite charts. Do not take my word for it. Do not take anyone else's word for it. I'm not trying to sell you anything. This is just CISA. And if you sit there and you talk about how our organizations are getting popped, right? It's phishing, it's vulnerable web apps, it's this and that. All of that crap combined doesn't even add up to 50%. If you look at CISA's own numbers from analyzing breaches, 54.3% of the time, attackers are just starting off with valid creds. It's hilarious, right? Like I'm sitting there, there's all these classes, and network defense is important. Detection is important, right? Forensics is important. Do not get me wrong. But a majority of the time, it doesn't even matter. They just have valid creds and we're getting in, right? And so I think it's important to at least take an hour and kind of look at what that ecosystem looks like, because a lot of people aren't familiar with it. And it's kind of crazy. So what we're going to talk about today, number one, legality. I'm not a lawyer, did not stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but we'll talk about what this looks like. Tiny bit of morality, but I am not the morality police. Types of breach data, because a lot of people aren't familiar with all of those. Where to find it, the fun part. How to search the data effectively, because it gets really, really big, and we'll talk about kind of how large some of these data sets can be. And then the last part, how can this information help? Where in that section I have a lot of actual real-world recent examples. They've all been sanitized a little bit so you can't see the exact company name, but they're still kind of crazy, right? So we'll start off talking about legality. And first things first, let's talk for a second about morality. I was listening to an OSINT podcast a little over a year ago, and at the very end of the podcast, the host asked the OSINT expert, who was being the guest, who's someone that I know and respect, what they thought about breach data. And the guest said, I would never use breach data in my investigations. I don't think it's morally right. I don't see any difference between using breach data and buying stolen property. And the host said, yeah, I think I agree. And I was sitting there and I just shook my head. And it didn't make me lose any respect for them. It honestly didn't. It just made me think, damn, I have a different set of experiences, right? A different set of experiences. One time my wife was working for a very large company. One of the law firms they used got popped. Their data posted on one of the ransomware blogs on the dark web. What were they telling all their clients? Don't worry, none of your information is on there. No offense, I'm gonna go ahead and take a look for myself, right? I've done the same thing when I was working with the government, some of our contractors. Don't worry, none of your sensitive information is there. Yeah, trust but verify, right? Qualys, it's an amazing company. What happened, what was it, 2020? Had a FTA, one of their file transfer boxes got popped, and all of a sudden there was word that client vulnerability scans were on the dark web. I had numerous places, public and private sector, reaching out to me that day. Hey, is this legit? Is our data there? Blah. And it ended up being like it was no big deal. Like I got the data and looked at it. It wasn't huge, but still, right? I remember laying in a hotel room bed with my wife. when the news broke that MGM got popped. And my wife asking me, hey, could you get a copy of this data because some of our executives at her company think that they have some sensitive information in there potentially, right? To me, these all seem like valid uses of breach data. Maybe I'm biased, but it is what it is. 2020, there was a company down in the southeastern part of the United States that had a lot of web hosting content contracts for law enforcement agencies. They got popped and all that data got downloaded. 269 gig of law enforcement sensitive information. A lot of law enforcement personnel's, a lot of it was them signing up for training programs, so it was kind of the worst of both worlds because they were marrying their personal information with their job information, right? And I absolutely wanted to get a copy of that and let people know what their exposure was, right? These are all, like I said, maybe I'm biased, but in my opinion, extremely valid uses for using breach data. And we'll see some more examples, like I said, at the end of this presentation. I'm not a lawyer, but I've spoken to numerous lawyers about this topic. And the guidance that I've got, even from risk-averse lawyers, has always been the same. And it's basically, I'm not allowed to hack the websites myself, which sucks, it's fun. I'm not allowed to convince someone else to hack the website for me and give me the data. Hey, what's your name? Do me a favor, can you shoot me a copy? Yeah, like that's not okay either, apparently. Who knew? But what they've all said is, if the data is sitting there online, dark web, wherever you got it, and you can grab a copy of it, do it. Right? That's what I've been told for numerous lawyers. Now, I gave a talk on breach data, like I said, about 4 years ago. Why am I giving another one? Because a lot has changed, right? There are absolutely things out there now that weren't out there then. One of the things that's changed, we actually have legal guidance on this now. This was issued like a month after my talk. I'm not saying I'm the reason for it. I'm just saying it was perfect timing of it. DOJ actually came out with legal guidance. What did it say? It basically said, if you're doing nothing more than passively gathering information in an online forum, even if that forum is basically like the cantina from Star Wars, right? It's a wretched hive of scum and villainy. They really have no problem with what you're doing, right? That's huge. Like I would have killed for that a few years earlier, but here we have it. Where the guidance is very clear right here, right? There's not a whole lot of ambiguity. And what I really love is the guidance is very heavy on intent, right? As it should be. I've done a lot of crazy things that have people looking at me like, why do you talk about this publicly? Like I'm not doing anything wrong with it. Right, yeah, I'm gathering all this data, but I'm using it for what I think is good, not bad. So I like the fact that intent is featured so frequently. Where the data goes from crystal clear with not a whole heck of a lot of ambiguity to basically like them going, is when it comes to buying data, right? Because I think it's very easy to make the statement that buying data could be considered supporting the criminal underground. And in a few slides, I'll give kind of my opinion. I'm not saying my opinion is right. I will tell you where I personally draw the line, right? And it's pretty low. Like I don't buy stuff for the most part. And we'll talk about that. From an ethic perspective, I usually don't have a problem with it. Every once in a while though, especially if you get like ransomware, something like that, where someone's entire network, their domain controllers, their exchange databases, all get zipped up and made available, it kind of sucks, right? It's kind of uncomfortable to look at. Look at some of these files, salary changes, severance reconciliation, a whole folder on terminated employees, right? Every single one of us, I don't care where you work, every single one of us has at least one story of some dumbass who was fired for your job for doing something that no one would believe. Imagine if you were that person and the full report of what you were doing was now sitting there in this folder on some site available to download, right? That would suck. I'm glad I'm not, right? But like I said, I'm not the morality police. Honestly, if I was, I would tell you as long as it didn't bother anyone else, do what you want. But like I said, it does, you don't see a lot of this, but just every once in a while it does get like, damn, that's a little awkward to look at sometimes. I think it's really important to take a minute here and talk about the types of breach data, because like I said, a lot of people aren't familiar with the nomenclature and aren't familiar with like the volume of basically what is out there. Number one is just the raw breach data, right? Whatever the attacker got, we get like a full dump of the database, whatever it is, here we go. Password hashes, email addresses, maybe passwords, real names, everything. This is what I want. This is, in my opinion, the gold standard, because a lot of what I'm doing for this, frankly, is gathering information, right? A lot of it's defensive work, but I also use it for OSINT type of work, gathering information. And from identity resolution perspective, this is huge, right? 15 years ago, when I was still with the government, and I just retired like a year ago, right? But like 15 years ago, dude, I was handing out subpoenas like Halloween candy, right? Because seriously, we would get a phone number, and what do we always say? Oh, someone's paying the bill. Well, that's changed now, right? No one's paying the bill anymore. What's that phone number come back to? Some Verizon DBA prepaid cellco no one's ever heard of because they paid $40 for it down at a Walmart like any other self-respecting drug dealer. I do the same thing when I'm setting up accounts, right? I just do. But you have these phones, right? How do you get identity resolution on a number that never comes back to them in any official system of record? You get it because they use that phone number to sign up for services. The services eventually get popped, the data gets out there, now we know who it is. One of my favorite breaches of 2021 was actually a VPN provider that holds numerous VPN companies. They got popped. And so this was hilarious. Here was people like trying to use hilarious from like an Intel perspective, right? Horrible from a privacy perspective. Let me be very clear on that. But here was people who were using a VPN to try to protect their privacy, and now it was giving away like how they paid for it, what their true IP address was. If it was a mobile device, it had like information unique to the mobile device, like the IMSI and the IMEI in this data set, right? It was kind of crazy. So here's someone trying to use it for OPSEC, and it ends up blowing up their entire spot. And so from an information gathering perspective, the fact that I use this a lot of times for OSINT, this is what I want. Far less interesting to me, but I still do want a copy of it, is something called combo lists, right? We just saw one of these, a huge one of these get released about 3 weeks ago now, and it was big news for like 5 minutes, then people realized there was no new data in there. I have, and I say this not to brag, right? I have terabytes upon terabytes of breach data. If I was to take all of my breach data and go through it and make a unique deduplicated list of email addresses and passwords, that would be a combo list, right? It's not the full data. It is nothing more than email addresses and passwords from numerous sources into one deduplicated list. Some of these combo lists are massive. Imagine, you know how small a text file is? These are just text files. And I have combo lists that are literally over 100 gigabytes, right, for one list. They're massive, some of these. If I was an attacker, I would love these. It's just credentials, right? This is how I'm getting into organizations, credential stuffing. This is what works. From an information gathering perspective, they're far less useful to me because I want all the other information, not just the email addresses and passwords. I still want a copy of it, though. Occasionally, they are useful. I remember one time I was still with the government, and I was running down a Russian cyber criminal. And I had their username. And whenever I do a search through my breach data, I would always be by username, not just full username, you know, the full email address. And I was looking for this username at mail.ru. As I start looking through my breach data results, I see that same username, but at Hotmail. And the password was Spiderman21 exclamation point. I kind of chuckled. I'm like, yeah, that's probably not my Russian actor. Go down through the breach data, eventually hit the mail.ru. What was the password? Spiderman21 exclamation point. Like, shit, I stand corrected. All right. So now I had another selector that I didn't have before. So like I said, I still like having copies of these. Like, I'm not going to turn it down, but they're far less interesting to me. A kind of crazy one are lists, right? And lists of what? Yes, lists of everything. Everyone, I gotta tell you, man, I've been to Langley, I've been to Meade, I've been to all those places, I spent time over there. Everyone's afraid of the government. Government has nothing on the advertising industry, right? Like, let's be honest, and I think a lot of us in here know that. And so the advertising industry, they have all this information and they sell it to other people in the advertising industry, et cetera. Well, guess what? Eventually that stuff oftentimes ends up on the underground too. And so you end up with these lists of people's information, their household demographics, like how many people live there, how many kids they have, what their estimated income is, all of this information that's ideal for marketers and everything else. And this ends up in the list of spammers. This ends up in the hands of cyber criminals, right, doing social engineering attacks, et cetera, et cetera. So these lists are kind of crazy sometimes. And this is the big one, right? This is the one that I think people truly need to know about. And these are the data stealer logs. When I first started getting involved in information security, right, I never went to college for it, anything like that. I was just a normal agent. And when I first started getting into this stuff, you would always hear about people like a computer gets taken over, it's a bot, right? And if someone's taken over 1,000 computers, right, that's now a botnet, right? We hear that term, botnet. Oh, it's a botnet of 1,000 computers. Oh, it's a botnet of 5,000 computers. And it was just in the quantity, right? That's what people cared about. And if we think about what they were using it for, a lot of times, honestly, it was fairly juvenile, right? It was denial of service attacks, but it wasn't even a lot of times ransom. It was like someone pissing you off at Xbox or PlayStation, right? And that's what we saw these denial of service attacks for. People have gotten wise, right? The criminals wised up and they realized, wait a second, you have a botnet of 30,000 systems? That's 30,000 or more users. Most of them probably have jobs. Where do they work, right? After 2020, after the pandemic, a lot of more people, at least temporarily, working from home, accessing internal networks from their personal computers, now getting affected. And so what they realized is, like, basically, essentially, at this point, it's gold mining, right? If you have all of this information, collecting information, a foothold on 30,000 systems, there's gold in there. You just have to find it. And this is what the ecosystem looks like right now. If you look at this, you see all of these folders. Every one of those folders is an infected system. And this is just one group, and this was one day. And in there, we see, what do we see? We see the different computers in there. We see passwords from their browser. We see all the files on their desktop, everything else. We see screenshots in here. This is absolutely crazy, a complete foothold of authentication credentials and everything else from that system. How prevalent is this? Well, yes. People have no idea how prevalent this is. Let me bail on the slides. I'm the presenter, I can do whatever I want, I think. Pull up here, Telegram. When I pull up my Telegram, you're gonna judge me. Oh well, like I'm okay with that. I'm in over 60 groups. And if we look at what they are, right, I'll just pick one at random here. This is all those data stealer logs. This is one Telegram channel. I'm in over 60 of them. And this is just today. There's 750 megs of logs, 1.3 gig of logs, over a gig of log. Like I said, I say this not to brag. I truly don't. It's not like this gets me ladies, right? I have terabytes of breach data. When it comes to data stealer logs and the system that I have rigged up to do it, kind of process everything automatically so I don't have to do this because it would be a nightmare, I have it feeding into a 16 terabyte hard drive and constantly just overwriting the old days with new ones. That 16 terabyte with a T hard drive at any one time has about a week's worth of data stealer logs. That's what it looks like. Dead serious. Like, oh, could there be duplicates in here? Yeah, I don't care, right? Because I'm just churning through it. It's only going to be on there for a few days anyway, right? And then what I do is I have code that every morning at 1 a.m. fires up, scans it for security, looks for any companies that I'm monitoring for, and sends me alerts in a Slack channel, right? So I can let people know what their exposure is. And like I said, we're going to see some actual sanitized screenshots at the end of this presentation. But this is just one Telegram channel of dozens and dozens. I could be in hundreds on here if I wanted to, that are churning this out every single day. And we saw what it looks like. Now, where is this feeding into, right? Well, a lot of you may have heard of a site that got taken down last year called Genesis Market on the dark web, right? And it was just initial access forums. That's great. Number one, they took down the ClearNet. The darknet was still up for a while. Number two, it's not the only one in town. And right now, the biggest one in this space on the darknet, spoiler alert, is called Russian Market. So if we look at Russian Market here, we see they're selling credit cards, of course, RDP logins for all of these different systems. The downside is it's very, very cost prohibitive. And by cost prohibitive, $7, $8. Oh, this one must be really, really good. It's $12. Seriously, $7, $8, $12 for RDP access into the system. Where this gets really terrifying is when you start looking at the search options by IP address, by operating system, by country, by state, by city. And this can go to some really, really dark places really, really quickly. I'm looking for any RDP access in any personal systems near Langley, Virginia, right, near Chantilly, near Fort Meade, Maryland, near all of the Augusta, Georgia. Yeah, name the place. So this can get to some very, very dark places kind of very, very quickly. That was just RDP. They also have other things, including just access, like we said, to those data stealer logs. You can see you can pre-order logs. That requires a little bit more money. To even create an account on Russia Market, you have to make a $100 deposit in cryptocurrency. So if anyone needs to buy anything, let me know. I got some money. But here we go. You see the different like kind of family of log stealers. Redline is a really, really big one. But we can see the domains that they have authentication credentials to. And once again, what is the cost? Yeah, it's a little pricier, 10 bucks. This is what it looks like. Right, it used to be back in the day, if you wanted to hack into an organization, I'll just pick Tesla, right? You actually had to try to find a vulnerability in Tesla systems. Then it kind of got to credential stuffing, right? We're using breach data. We're just gathering up 1,000 credentials and trying what works. What about MFA? Yeah. I had a reporter with the Financial Times reach out to me about 5 months ago and ask me, hey, how are hackers bypassing MFA? I'm like, I'll tell you, but you're not going to like the answer. And the answer is I'm going to find a way in that doesn't require it. I'm going to do 2 hours of enumeration. I'm going to find 100 ways into their domain. How many do I need to find that don't enforce multi-factor? 1, and I'm in. Credential stuffing, boom. But now it's not even that. If you wanted to hack into one of these companies, it's literally as simple as creating a Russia Market account, making a deposit with cryptocurrency, and doing a search on here. And so you're like, why do you gather up those data stealer logs? Like, why do you keep an eye on those? This is why. For when an organization that I monitor for has data that ends up in there, they hear about it from me, not about it after the fact, right? This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is why I'm firing the alerts every day. And I think it's very, very important that, like I said, this accounts right here for almost 55% of how our organizations are getting popped. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. And like I said, defense is important, don't get me wrong, but you at least need to pay a little bit of attention to this stuff too, in my opinion. All right, I've shown you all the fun stuff. Where do we actually try to find them if we want to? Number one, should you? This, I don't even know how to describe this. Do I gather this stuff up myself and store it? Absolutely, have for years. If someone asks me if they should do it, I'll say probably not. All right, it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of effort to gather it. A lot of it has malware in it, especially the data stealer logs, right? It's, good God almighty, if you think about it, this is information and files collected from compromised systems. It makes sense that it has a lot of malware in there. It's how the systems got compromised in the first place, right? So we always have to be kind of careful with that. And when I think of the data stealer logs too, just to be clear, when I say files on there, it's got like PDFs and things like that from the desktop, but it's mostly text files. It's authentication credentials from browsers, etc. And you're still talking about 16 terabytes of text files in a week. Those are the numbers that we're talking about. If someone wants to host it themselves, like I said, if they ask me if I should, I'll say no. If they ask me, cool, I'm going to do it, how do I do it? I'll totally help them. Right? Like, seriously, it's not. So I get nothing from it. It's just I'll help them do it. The pros are storage is cheap. I just bought a 24 terabyte hard drive a couple months ago. It was like less than $300. Like, that's insane. Right? And so being able to trade storage and effort, shoddy Python code written by ChatGPT, in exchange for like a 5-6 figure threat intelligence feed, it makes a lot of sense to me, right? And also I can search the data with zero limitation and with zero tracking. No one knows what I'm searching, what I'm doing with it, etc. The cons, the data can be difficult to locate. A lot of the forums use the Russian language and are full of hackers. Like, I don't speak Russian. Data sets can be huge and tedious to search. And the argument of maybe considered supporting the criminal underground. Like I said, I'll address this, at least my perspective of it, in just a second. There are sites, right? The easy mode. If you don't want to do it yourself, you can just pay for access to someone else's repository. And there are companies out there, some of you may have heard of one based out of Austin called SpyCloud. They gather up breach data and make it available to enterprises, financials, etc. It's a good product. It is not cheap in any way, shape, or form. You're talking like 6 figures a year. right? There are also places that are designed more for the individual. And one of those is called leakcheck.io. This is based out of the UK. They offer a lifetime subscription option that is priced at $25. Like, I've had mine for years. I love it. They're constantly adding more breach data, which I love. The downside of it is they give you very, very limited search options. I can search by email address and I can search by username. That's it. Right? I can't search by password. I can't search by show me everyone for a domain. I can't do any of those types of things. I can't search by phone number, which from an OSINT perspective, like, is very, very useful. The only phone numbers you can search in this system, if you look very, very closely, like, no, we can do a phone number search, CIS only. I actually had to look up what CIS was. It's the Commonwealth of Independent States. It's the anti-NATO. So it's Russia, Moldova, all the stands, et cetera, et cetera. They'll let you search those phone numbers, and I have tested it. They have like VK data and some other phone number data in there. So if that's relevant, but I mean, honestly, it's really tough to get pissed at paying $25. You can probably find $25 value out of there if you're interested. The standard that people have been using for years that everyone talks about, oh yeah, let me show you Leak Check here real quick too, what it kind of looks like. Here I put in a username for a friend of mine. Got their Gmail password, their work, where they work, that one, and then their old education, right? So you see in the different breaches that it was in, we can see I've censored it out, obviously, but what their password was, et cetera, et cetera. So this is kind of what it looks like. The one that everyone talks about, the one that everyone uses, if you go ask on Twitter what you should use for this, everyone's going to tell you dehashed. Dehashed is a little bit more money. It's like $6 a week, $17 a month, or like $180 for the year. They let you search with no restriction. Email address, phone number, by domain, password, IP. It's amazing. Here's the problem. I see zero evidence that they've added any new data in over 2 years. If you go to their webpage, it's got the amount of records that we have, and it keeps going up. I'm calling BS on that. I am a paying member, have been for a couple of years. I have filed 2 support tickets asking them if they're entering in new information. I have gotten back no results. I've asked on Twitter, nothing. And so it's tough, right? Because honestly, this is going to become, you may still find value in this, but it's going to become less valuable every single day, as it doesn't have kind of these new data sets in there. So I'm seeing basically no one talk about it publicly. I put it out on Twitter maybe 5 months ago, like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Anyone else seeing anything different? Nothing. So for what it's worth, I hope I'm wrong. Like, I hope they start adding new stuff again, but I don't think they've added anything in years, because I have new data sets and I'm checking and nothing is in there. This is a company called Hudson Rock, and they specialize in the data stealer logs, what we just talked about, which I'm going to search for more, right? The ones coming out of Telegram. They're based out of Israel. When I was with the government, right, with DHS, I had a never-ending stream of people coming to me trying to sell us their products. And I was usually the one that they wanted in the room to call BS, right? Is this worth it? Is this not, et cetera. And I had one question that was always my favorite, one question to rule them all. I love asking companies this. What is your competitive advantage over everyone else in the space? And if you come up with some bullshit like, it's our people, stop. Now, seriously, what is your competitive advantage over everyone else in the space? I spoke with one of the 2 founders of this. They're both, one of the founders is a Israeli intelligence community, former Israeli IC, who did this for them. But I asked him, I said, what's your competitive advantage over everyone else in the space? Zero hesitation. He said, we're in Israel. We can do things legally you can't elsewhere. I'm like, that's about the most honest answer I've ever gotten. Thank you, right? Like, kudos, I'm not even mad. So they make this available, right? It's a commercial product, but for free. You can create an API and do some searches. Just know that the search results are going to be heavily redacted. So it is, like, on one hand, it's kind of cool to see, but on the other hand, like, honestly, all it's going to do is scare you into seeing that, like, your org has information in there, but you can't kind of see it all, which is the point, right? It's brilliant on their perspective. So if you don't want to go to Telegram and kind of do some of those things, but kind of want to check, this is a way to check it for free. And then, like I said, they have the commercial option as well, too. If you're going the do-it-yourself route, don't have the time to get into here, don't really want to get into it in here, right? Be smart about it. Use protection, right? Whatever that looks like to you. Manage your attribution with the VPN. Tor, etc., whatever, virtual machines, right? Even like a lot of my code automatically ClamAV, which is a god-awful antivirus product, but still on kind of like a standalone system that I have, I'd do my clam checks on everything that gets downloaded, etc. Just something to try to use protection, right? Like I said, especially data stealer logs, that's getting information from compromised systems. There's a reason why it got compromised. Then the biggie, raidforums.com, which got taken down. Then breachforums.com, that got taken down. Palm got arrested. I just saw they appealed something with him, it was like 2 days ago. That trial is still going on, Pomeranian. But right now, the current iteration is breachforums.is. What this is English language, very, very easy to use, whole little community of people that share this type of information. And so if we look here, you don't even have to be authenticated, right? I'm sitting here, you see we databases, they have all different categories like data stealer logs, whatever type of stuff. So I pulled this up probably half an hour before my talk started. Let's see what's in here. I haven't even looked on it yet. We have 35 million LinkedIn records, 200 million Twitter scrape. All right, let's make this a little bit, right? We can just sit here and scroll down and see if anything is relevant to our interest. If you want to download data sets from here, it costs credits, right? You can earn credits through posting, you can earn credits through other sources, or you can just flat out buy credits. The conversion ratio works out to this. Anything that you want here, you can buy for about $3 US. It's about $3 per data set for anything that you want. It's in English language. It's fairly safe. It's easy to use. I love these sites. There's stuff that I shouldn't say publicly, but I still do. This is probably top of the food chain. Said I was federal law enforcement for a long time. I get it. Whenever I hear law enforcement takes down a ransomware group, kudos. They take down this other horrible Genesis Mark, everything, kudos, kudos. When they took down raid forums, I cussed. When they took down breach forums, I cussed. This is just my opinion, right? But here's my opinion. This is very easy to use. Can I get the data elsewhere? Yes. Are the top tier criminals getting their data from here? They are not. They're getting it from the top tier forums, a lot of them Russian language like Exploit, XSS. They're getting it from Telegram. This is where they're getting it. This just makes it very easy. I had a friend of mine who works for what I think is the largest financial institution in the world reach out to me about 6 weeks ago. Biden Cash. There was a dump, Biden Cash. It was like tons of information, people's credit card numbers, etc. And he hit me in Signal. He's like, hey, my company wants like a copy of the Biden Cash dump. Do you have it? And I was kind of busy. And I'm like, yeah, let me check. I log in here. Boom, there's the dump. $3 in credits. I buy it, download it, scan it, make sure it's safe. Put it in my own Dropbox so I don't have to send them that link. And then I send them a link to it, right? Could I have found it on Telegram? Could I have found it other places? Yeah, but that was quick and easy, right? This is, in my opinion, where the good ones hang out. I think this is full of a lot of defenders. And so when you take these sites down, I get it, it's really cool. You get to issue the nice press release and put your logo up on the site. But I think you're imposing cost on defenders, not on criminals, right? Everyone wants to talk about imposing cost. I think this is imposing cost on defenders because the criminals aren't getting their stuff from here anyway. So my own personal opinion. And I told you, this is not, no lawyer has ever told me this, anything else. If there's a data set that I want, and now I get a message from the hacker who has it, they say, I'll give it to you for $100, I'm not gonna do it. Like, what's up, brother? I'm not going to do that. But if I see it posted here and I can grab a copy for $3, I'll grab it. Right? That's kind of, because usually it's not the attackers that post it here. Right? The hackers, for the most part, aren't posting their stuff here. It's someone that gets it from some other source, Telegram, whatever they got it. They post it here trying to earn credits for themselves so they can download things. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's wrong. If someone disagrees with me, I wouldn't try to convince them to my point. But that is where I personally draw the line. Have I dealt with hackers for information? Yes, I have. Not on behalf of myself, on behalf of the government. Like, I have done that work before. Me personally, I wouldn't do it, but here, yeah, I find no problem with that. So, not saying it's right, But that's where I personally draw the line on that. But breachforums.is, it comes back to, once again, I'm not authenticated. I'm not logged into that site. And yet I'm still able to see all the stuff. If you actually want to like download something, then you have to be, logged in and deal all that with the credits. But why wouldn't you monitor that, right? Even though a lot of times they won't say specific organizations, sometimes they do. I have seen some really, really specific chatter in there. All right, as far as like, oh yeah, it's a Fortune 500 streaming service, and I have this. It's not a whole heck of a lot of those, right? And if you're one of like the 5 of them, it might be relevant to your interest to kind of take a look at that. So places like this, definitely worth monitoring and kind of the point of understanding what this looks like. When it comes to finding data, as simple as it sounds, Google it, right? Seriously, it's so simple, but once you have one data set, or you know the name of one data set, just Googling it, you know what you're gonna find? You're gonna find that data set posted on a site with other data sets as well. And then you just got, as simple as it is, right? You just find one, onto the next one, onto the next one. I said you can absolutely, in this space, trade effort and storage space for the lack of a budget, right? You can do that in a lot of spaces if we're being honest, but definitely this one as well. And also, never forget about archive.org. People don't realize archive.org is a damn vacuum cleaner, right? I had a student one time when I was teaching who said, hey, where can I get poison ivy? I'm like, hanging out behind a truck stop's probably a pretty good start. Like, oh, you mean the malware? Yeah. That hasn't been online. Like Shapeless took that site down in like 07, 08. Hasn't been online for over a decade. Archive.org not only has a copy of that site, but all the links still work. And that's just one example, right? When archive.org, like I said, they're a vacuum cleaner. When they see a site, not only do they try to grab a copy of that site, if there's links to files to download, they will grab those files too. And there are files that have not existed on the internet in over a decade that are still sitting in archive.org's repository if you know how to look for it. And so like I said, never forget, if you're looking for something and struggling with it, archive.org is an extremely useful place to check out because like I said, I'm aware of files haven't existed for a decade and they're still sitting right there. Unbelievably useful. There's a site called Distributed Denial of Secrets. They have more of a corruption type of angle to it than normal type of breach data. So when you see like the Panama Papers, when you see some of those other leaks coming out there, Blue Leaks, they were the one who released that one, but that's not a bad place to monitor. They're good sometimes for if you're doing a lot of financial research, right? Actually trying, like I said, the Panama Papers, some of those that are more a little bit financial, people trying to hide their money offshore, someone leaking all the information about that. It's interesting sometimes. It's another source. Twitter searches, right? This is tougher now that the API, at least now the API, they have an API plan down to $100 a month, which is better than it was at first. So I'd like to see them lower it even more. But Twitter searches, right? You see very, very commonly people post things on Twitter. Years ago, a lot of you may remember, right? There was a site called Mega Upload based out of New Zealand, run by a dude named Kim.com. Like, no, what was his name? Kim.com. That is a big dude. I'm a big dude, but that dude was a big dude. He looked like one of the M&Ms from the commercials. Like, I'm not even joking, right? And eventually, like, the site got taken down by U.S. authorities. He went to court and said, I never lived in the U.S. I never worked in the U.S. None of my income is tied to it. How can you seize my money? It's a whole thing I'm not going to get into. But Mega Upload is down. Long live Mega.nz, right? This is the new variant of it. If you are posting something on Mega.nz instead of Dropbox or something else, there's a reason. Right? There's a reason why you're posting it on Mega. And so that itself becomes very, very useful as a search criteria. Like one of the things that I did with my Twitter API key, right, is looking for any links posted on Twitter where the file was hosted on Mega.nz. Because a lot of times you see breach data posted there, it may get taken down eventually, but if I can grab a copy first, I'm in it, right? And so yeah, searching for mega links, right? Twitter searches can be a good place to check. Sometimes when the data sets are so massive, they use BitTorrent. Distributed Denial of Secrecy uses BitTorrent for a lot of these data sets. And so torrents are great when you can find them. That's the problem. They usually don't use the name of the data set quite often, right? I mean, seriously, if you go to, no one here has ever pirated content, I'm sure, right? But if you're looking for a movie, You go to Pirate Bay, you go to one of these other sites, you type in the name of the movie, and now you see all these torrents named that. People don't do that with breach data. But there is this, find all the breach data you want with this one weird trick, all right? Every time you see an article about some place getting popped, the author usually wants to show a very sanitized copy of the data, right? They want to prove that they have it. They want to kind of make it a little more visceral, a little more real, but it's very, very sanitized, right? I did not sanitize this out. This is straight from a news article. But if you look at the top, what does that look like? Ledger orders buyers only. Well, that to me looks like a tab in like Notepad++, right? That looks like a tab in a text editor, and that looks like a file name. And so what we need is we need a BitTorrent search engine that not only searches the names of the torrents themselves, but actually tries to do the crazy, crazy thing of cataloging the files inside of the torrent, right? We have one that I'm aware of. It is called BT-dig. Now, do not shoot the messenger right here. You see BT-dig with 2 Gs. If you go to btdig with 2gs.com, it will not work. But if you go to BT-dig with 1 G, it will. Why is it BT-dig? Stop. But yeah, if you look at the title of the slide, right, it's BT-dig, but with 1 G. But if we look down here, we go to BT-dig, I type in ledger orders buyers, and I find a 600 gigabyte file called raw. That's very useful, right? Very useful file name. But as you start going down in the directory hierarchy, you see the ledger breach data down in there. So basically, we have a 600 gigabyte giant file zipped up, and what we want is just one little tiny piece of it too. If you've never used BitTorrent before, one really nice thing about BitTorrent, you don't have to download the whole 600 gigs. You can just selectively isolate what you want and download that. So BT-dig is fantastic. I had a student about 5 months ago now in my class, and for the last final exercise, we were doing a threat assessment on a university. And there was this one university that was involved in a data breach. And the president of the university is actually there online saying, yeah, we have contracted with a top cybersecurity firm, and there is no copies of this data breach anywhere on the internet or dark web. We have confirmed it, so you don't have to worry about it. My student took this as a personal challenge. Took him about 45 minutes to find it. This is how we got it. Doing this search right here. Oh, we didn't find it on the internet. Cool, it's sitting there in a torrent somewhere buried down in there. So this is a very, very effective technique. Like I said, it's totally free. Got you. Most of the cool kids are on Telegram. It just is. People in the Western Hemisphere do not realize how big Telegram is. They just don't, right? Telegram is WhatsApp for Russia and just kind of that whole general Eastern European market. And it's not just a messaging app, though. You also saw those rooms like I was in, right? All those different kind of channels where people sit there and post data, post whatever. You see some crazy, crazy stuff on Telegram. There's piracy channels where people just go into a channel and say the name of the movie, and if the bot has it, it'll auto-reply with a link to download. Right? You see some crazy, crazy stuff kind of hanging out on here. And it's all free for the most part, right? You do see a lot of the groups who will do, if you notice back at the message, they'll post, right? That one channel had posted like what? That was, God, gigs and gigs of data just for today alone, and that was only one channel. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll say, oh, if you want our direct private feed, it's like $50 a week. Right, or $100 a month or something like that, and then we'll get you into our private VIP channel. I personally, this is my decision, I don't pay for any of those, because if I'm getting terabytes a day for free, I'm like, yeah, it's slightly less relevant to my interests. So I'm not saying I never would, but I personally don't pay for any of those feeds. If you want to get started in Telegram, right, use OPSEC, use a phone number. Telegram's a whole thing. We could sit here and talk for an hour. Anyone know Telegram is a cryptocurrency? Yeah, Telegram has its own cryptocurrency, Toncoin. They have a website called Fragment. Go to fragment.com. You know what it'll tell you? You can't go there from a US IP address. Yeah, it's a whole little, it's a marketplace of people buying and selling virtual phone numbers and Telegram names, and it's run by Telegram. The virtual phone numbers are good for nothing but authenticating with Telegram with. So you have people authenticated to Telegram. You're like, well, what's the phone number tied to it? There isn't one. It's a virtual phone number tied to some crap coin. Right? Like seriously, Telegram's kind of crazy. We can sit here and riff on an hour for that if we wanted to. But if you want to get started on Telegram, but you're like, how do I even get started? Where do I know? One of my favorite sites on the internet, right? Some of you are probably familiar with this, Deep Dark CTI. This is a GitHub repository. If you take nothing else from this talk, go to Deep Dark CTI. It is updated on a fairly regular basis, and it's basically links to places all over the seedy underbelly of the internet and the dark web. Marketplaces, there's probably over 100 Telegram channels on there. Are all of them going to work? Probably not, but just a few kind of get in there. But Deep Dark CTI, it's actively maintained. It is fantastic, right? This is the best one-stop shop, I can tell you, if you want to kind of get started monitoring in this stuff. I found and downloaded some, right? What do we actually do with them? When you're dealing with data sets this large, pretty much anything in the GUI is going to laugh at you, right? If you're actually trying to open it up in Notepad or anything else. So command line tools be your friend. Cat in Linux, type in Windows, right? grep in Linux, find str, find string on Windows. Be your friend, just kind of generating subsets if you want to. So like I said, know the command line. They're too big, they're going to crash pretty much anything GUI you try to use. If you think, oh, I'm just going to download all these and put these in a normalized database, no, you're not. Don't lie to yourself. Seriously, it would be a full-time job. It really, really would be a full-time job for me if I want to try to get these in a normalized database. And I really don't see the value proposition for at least how I use it, right? I'm not trying to make this as a service available for others. I monitor and make that a service, but not trying to serve it up to others. But still, if you're not going to use a normalized database, searching this is going to take a ridiculously long time. So what you want to do is you want to make an index, right? An index in computer terms, we used to use it a ton in forensics. You don't see it nearly that much anymore because it doesn't scale as well for incident response, but it's the same as an index in a book. Imagine if I gave you a book that was 1,200 pages and it was a world history book, and I said, hey, do me a favor, tell me every page that mentions Napoleon. You're like, yeah, I'll get right on that. No, it's like a week's worth of work, right? Or it's like 10 seconds worth of work. Because if the publisher has an index in the book, you flip to the back, go to the end, Napoleon, boom, boom, here are the pages, right? With an index, the publisher traded effort in the front to make it and storage space to store the index in exchange for quicker lookups in the future. And we have that same thing in computers. And you don't even need to buy anything. There's a tool called QGrep. And it's available on Windows, available on Linux, Mac, anything you got. It's completely free, open source there. It is like grep, but it builds indexes. The indexes don't take up a ton of room by index standards, and it makes the searches ridiculously quick. I don't do this on my data stealer logs because I'm rotating them constantly anyway, so it's kind of pointless. But all my breach data, QGrep is what I'm using now. I was using something else before. I've completely shifted to this. So QGrep is fantastic. Like I said, it's basically grep, but it makes indexes. So relevant to your interest, check it out. Final section, almost out of time here. How can this information be used for good, right? And you see there are some kind of canned examples I can get, pen testers, forensics practitioners, training passwords. I've done all of these things. Every single one of these things I have done. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I told you I was going to give you real examples. Every single one of these examples is from within the past year, all right? So the source of account takeovers. This is a very, very large company. Think streaming service. That was seeing, because if you think about it, most of us here have a Netflix account. None of us have a Netflix email unless you work for Netflix, right? We all use our various email addresses to get there. And so this is a company, and it wasn't Netflix, let me be clear, but like same genre, that was seeing a huge rise in accounts getting taken over. And they wanted to know what the source of it was. And so I'm like, cool. Well, do you have a list of the accounts getting taken over? Yeah, give me one. Gave me one. I'm like, all right, was their password this? Yeah. Okay, give me another. Was their password this? They compute the hash. Yeah. Give me another. Compute the hash. Yeah. All right, it's all from here. Right, here's kind of the source. And so now you know, right? You can make the decision to, if I were you, I would take every one of your users that is in this list and have them roll their passwords, right? It's up to you if you want to do that. That is what I would do, but help them identify the source. Another source identification was much more recently. This was an MGM copycat attack. Remember several months ago when MGM got popped? It was like the whole thing, right? A friend of mine, I was in Vegas at the time, and a friend of mine was down at MGM, and they sent me a pic of all the slot machines being down, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then like 5 minutes later, they're like, oh yeah, no one can get into their rooms. I'm like, oh shit, just got real. Yeah, like damn, that got real. Thank God Caesar's pays. That where I was staying, but this was a Fortune 100 company that had basically the same type of attack go against them, social engineering, their help desk. Here's what's crazy. They actually let me listen to the audio tape of the call. And it was someone in not great English sitting there like, oh yes, I am executive VIP and I lost the device with my mobile device on it. Can you please reset it for me? And they're like, what number was the device that you lost? They're like, I don't know, I lost it. I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, please no. And the help desk person goes, oh, was it 520-777? I'm like, Jesus. Oh, and read them 2 phone numbers and let them pick, right? Yeah. But when they got it, thankfully it wasn't that big of a deal. But at the end of it, they're like, well, this person had some information. We want to know where they got the information from. We took the email addresses of all the targets and put them into Have I Been Pwned? And they all came back from being in the LinkedIn. The most recent one, not the old one, but the most recent LinkedIn data breach. They said, we want to see what information is there. Yeah, no problem. I have a copy of that. Boom, boom, there we go. We can answer that question and let you know if this is the source of the information. And a lot of what I do, dealing with this type of stuff, dealing with the cloud a lot of times, right? Places get popped, they deal with it. It's no big deal. But now it's like, okay, from looking at the cloud trail logs, we know what creds were used, but how did they get out there, right? Is it someone who was sloppy and put it in a Git commit 18 months ago? Or is it one of your developers is sitting there with data, with their system popped and it's appearing in data stealer logs? For an early warning system, almost done here, I apologize for how redacted this slide is, but when I tell you what it is, I think you'll understand why. You see an email there with contractor and then something else.com. That is a contractor email for someone at a Fortune 100 company. Not one that I monitor for. So why did I hit on this? Because right beneath it, that guest wireless, they had a recent log on to the wireless at a Fortune 200 company that I do actually monitor for. And so it was like I got to let them know, yeah, you may want to revoke these credentials, like ASAP, right? And so this is an idea of like, oh, why do you do that? Well, this is why. I said, over 50%, this is how they're getting in, so at least keep an eye on it. I think this is the next to last slide. This one was bad too. This was a Fortune 500 company. One of the boxes that hit on my data stealer log, I had to do a double take. I'm like, wait, what? It had an open VPN key. And I'm like, oh dear God. I'm like, all right, I have friends that work in this company, so I think I'm okay doing what I'm getting ready to do. I tried to use the key, and it worked. It authed. Yeah, so once again, kind of letting them know, yeah, kill this, right? This is it. This is what I'm doing, right? I lay it out. I don't hold anything back. So if you like this, there's like I said, I'm a SANS instructor. SANS every year does an OSINT summit. It's always really, really good talks. It's 2 days of talks. It's coming up in just a couple of weeks. And it's in the DC area, but it's available online for free. And so if you're interested in this type of stuff, like sign up for the summit. Even if you can't watch it live, still sign up. The reason being, if you sign up, and like I said, it's totally free, they give you access to the talks recording right away. They eventually post them all on YouTube, but for some reason it takes them like 2 months. So sign up for it if you want to watch it. And other than that, if you have any questions, hit me up. We got a Larry Pesci coming up next, who is absolutely fantastic. I'm looking forward to seeing his talk. If you have any questions, let me know though. So whatever time I have left here, not much. Sir. Given the availability, the accessibility of breach forms, would I consider it OSINT? 100%, because you don't even need to be logged in. Like you can set up Google. I have Google alerts going against breach forums that'll be on certain key terms and things like that. So I absolutely would consider that OSINT.
If you wanted to get deeper into threat intel, would you recommend them learning Russian then, or it sounds like it?
Deeper into threat intel, would I recommend learning Russian? If I could pick any language, my wife speaks a little bit of Russian, but she's not fluent. She can get by. But if I personally had to learn a language, like I know Spanish, which is great for my day-to-day life, but for CTI, like Russian would be handy. So I'm far too lazy to actually do it, but yeah, it would be a handy choice. Question?
You say you normally go through like a week of breach logs. Are there some that you just like keep around and you can sit there, like the LinkedIn example?
Yeah, so to be clear here, the breach data, so actually a place gets popped, the data set is out, I never get rid of those. If there was a digital version of Hoarders for that, I would be on there. Like seriously, I'd be like on the little person for like the opening screenshot of that. Now the data stealer logs, that's a different animal. So like for breach data, I have a 24 terabyte drive full of breach data. Then I have a separate 16 terabyte drive for just the data stealer logs. Those are constantly rotating through. But if you give me some breach data, I'm never getting rid of that. Never getting rid of that. I hoard it like smog. The question was, what is my title in the government doing this type of stuff? I was just an agent, but it was a very, very weird, like kind of pigeonhole type of thing. So it was just my technical experience and what I was doing outside that kind of got me. But I was just a gun toter. I still had to go qualify every month, so, or every quarter.
Can advertisers just go on these websites, pull down all this information,
Can advertisers just pull down all this information and mass spam? I don't think a lot of legitimate places do it, but a ton of shady places do it. A ton of shady places do exactly that. Like I said, the things that are designed for sale to legitimate marketers ends up in the hand of spammers too. So I think that's my time. If you have any questions, I'm really, really easy to find. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Knock 'em dead, champ. Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that. It was fun.